I'd like to welcome everybody and just say I think it's great that you made the decision to be on the call today as a part of the Hometown Chambers group, because I know as a small chamber, sometimes it's easy for us to think that we're all alone out there or we're the only ones facing a particular challenge. And this group is such a great resource for sharing both what our challenges are and what is working for us or not working. And I think the value of today's particular topic is how we can use some of the information that we each have to help us all make better decisions. So today we're very fortunate to have Jennifer Chittenden of downtown Des Moines with us as our special guest.
Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ginny, and welcome, Jennifer. And just a few housekeeping notes. Today's webinar is being recorded. There will be time for question and answer throughout the webinar, and definitely at the end. You can use the question panel of the GoToWebinar admin section on your screen to write in a question. And then I do have the ability to send you all a phone pin if you would like to speak out loud, so we can test that out. Sometimes that can be a little tricky, so if all else fails, we end up using the question panel for sure. So I just want to make sure you have a voice in today's webinar. And so again, we'll get started. You are in listen only mode, but please do feel free to write in your questions. You
Sarah,
will also see the, yes.
I'm sorry, I have one fast question. Are we supposed to be seeing something on our screen now?
You should be. Let me try this again. Do you see the dynamic chamber benchmarking?
No, I just see
screen?
the GoToWebinar connected to GoToWebinar, but that's all I can see.
Okay. Jennifer or others, do you see my screen just as a test mode here?
Yeah.
You do? Okay. It could be sometimes a slow web connection will cause that blip. You might try either refreshing. If any others have that same, let's see. Okay, great, thanks. Just heard from Kathy. I can see the screen. Thank you so much for that feedback. Sometimes it can just be a slow web connection. So hopefully just refresh your browser, or if all else fails, come back into the webinar through the same link you had
Okay, so just
when you
relink it
registered.
again. I'll try that.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you.
Good question. Okay, so again, I'm Sarah Melby. I'm Director of Information and Research at ACCE, and today's webinar will be about 45 minutes total, including question and answer time, and we want to demonstrate the ways that smaller chambers are using the key performance indicators data and this new report card that you can download from Dynamic Chamber Benchmarking, and it's filled with operations metrics. And we do welcome you to write in your questions again and learn from peers. I will repeat questions aloud as they come in, so that way we can still keep this open networking going. So if we were having an open discussion, one of the questions I would say would be, how many of you have downloaded the new Key Performance Indicators Chamber Report Card? You can use the question panel and say yes, no, haven't heard of it, or I will be telling you more all about that today, and Jennifer will also share how she has been using the Key Performance Indicators Report Card. So it is fairly new. We did just launch the Key Performance Indicators Report Card in Dynamic Chamber Benchmarking just a few months ago. And a couple notes about that. We are in data collection mode for fiscal year 2016. So if you are looking for reports and you would like this Key Performance Indicators Report Card, I'm going to call it KPI for short, you will want to go into the fiscal year 2015 from the year drop down. And so just a note that all those reports and comparisons are available to survey participants. That's the one value of participating, but it's also much more than that. The benchmarking, the true benchmarking capacity that you get through these reports from participating. So again, if you've participated and once you've logged into Dynamic Chamber Benchmarking, which you can access from the information portal, and then click on Dynamic Chamber Benchmarking, it will launch you into the platform. And as CEOs, you will see 3 sections. You will see Chamber Profile, Operations Survey, and Salary Survey. And Salary Survey section is only open to CEOs or the staff that you delegate. We'll be spending the time today in the Operations Survey. But just a quick note that the Chamber Profile is always, it's required. So the 2 other sections do pull data from the Chamber Profile. So start there, that's the easy section, and then move on into the Operations Survey. So this new Key Performance Indicators report card does live inside the Section 2 Operations Survey section. And again, I can double check my own Chamber's progress report here for the previous fiscal years. I would get a gold star for participating in 2016 here, and I can see that I've participated in 2015. So I know that I have access to the reports available. Again, when you're navigating and looking at previous years to download reports and or update or complete information in the surveys, you can just use this year drop-down. Reports and charts are available under this tab, Reports and Charts tab. Just a quick note that the Compare Chambers tab is where you can go to view your Chamber's answers question by question. And so it's basically raw data, question by question. Compare Chambers is a helpful area. It's not where you go to download the full calculated reports though. So just keep in mind that to go to Reports and Charts, this is where you will download the variety of reports. Chamber Operations Report, the Trend Report, which I'll be showing you as well today, the Mini Membership Statistics Report, which is just pulled from the Operations Report, and then the Chamber Report Card with KPIs that we're going to be talking about here. So that's where you download these reports. You know you're in as your chamber. It tells you your name, your chamber name here. We are in as a demo. And if you've attended previous webinars on Dynamic Chamber Benchmarking, you know that you have these really powerful filter options. And we are going to talk a little bit today about peer clusters, and I think Jennifer has used some of the peer cluster options. We'll chat a little bit more about that. But basically, one of the #1 questions I hear from hometown chamber members or from other smaller members is how many chambers of my size have participated. And I'm happy to report that we actually have a very good, a strong set of chambers with revenue under $450,000, $500,000 who have participated. And thanks to many of you and to Jennifer, who's on the line with us today, many of you have reached out to your small but mighty chamber peers and sent emails and asked them to continue to participate in fiscal year 2016. So if anyone would like to do that, send an email to your peers and ask them to participate, because the numbers are stronger when we have you know, the industry that represents the data here. So peer participation is very important. So do ask your peers to do their due diligence and participate in the surveys. Jennifer will also help us understand a couple ways to save time and just get it done. So let's see here. We'll talk a little bit about these filters. Again, I find the most helpful ones to be the total revenue filter, which you can filter down by chambers less than 450,000, for example. And again, we're looking at fiscal year 2015, but I can see that there are 118 chambers who have revenue under 450,000 who have participated in the survey. And then the other point I'll make is that if you are a member of the Hometown Chambers Council, and you can double check that by looking under Networks, and then, or ask Dana or myself, but under Networks on the ACCE website, Community Peer Groups, and then Hometown Chambers Council roster. You can click on that to find your name and make sure you're in there. If your chamber is part of that community peer group, you will see in here this peer cluster, you will see a peer cluster for Hometown Chambers Council. Likewise, if you are in another community peer group such as Destination Cities, you will see both peer cluster options. You can apply one peer cluster like the Hometown Chambers Council, and that will filter out the data, compare your chamber to the other Hometown Chamber Council members who have actually input their answers into the operation survey. So just a note about that, I believe that both the total revenue or using the peer cluster filters are very powerful for our small but mighty chambers. So I'm just going to actually dive right into a report here, and I'm going to apply a small revenue filter here. You can also do a membership filter, which is also helpful. So a couple of notes about those filters, though. The more you filter out the results, the smaller the data set. So that's just something to keep in mind. I'm going to download this chamber report card. So this KPI annual report it's basically like a dashboard report, and it helps show your chamber's performance compared to peers, and it lets you benchmark with peers. So benchmarking is definitely a buzzword we're hearing all over the business world, nonprofit world, chamber world. And benchmarking is tracking and comparing your organization against others to see how you measure up. And it can be done on a variety of information, whether it's programs, membership data, finances, HR, and staff. So again, if you use the new peer cluster option to compare to other chambers in the Hometown Chamber Council or the revenue filter, you know that you're looking at a set of data that is comparing to chambers most like you. So this is the new Key Performance Indicators report card. It starts with a cover page. Tells you again your chamber name, the date it was run, the data year you're looking at, and then any filter you applied. And what I love about this report is it was helped to be developed by another chamber in Florida who was using something very similar for their board and their staff meetings. And upon request, we were able to launch this KPI, and again, it's just a one-page at a glance. So it can definitely be thought of as kind of a quasi or hybrid dashboard report along with benchmarking. So dashboard in the sense that it's giving you some very key measurements, key stats, and really helping you get a sense of your annual performance. Again, this is 2015, but it has data on staffing, total chamber member total chamber staff FTEs. It shows your chamber, your percentile compared to the peer group that you're looking at, along with the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentiles. So you can really see where you're falling in line with your peers. So in addition to the staffing data, there is also membership data, retention of dollars, retention of accounts, first year retention of accounts, total current member accounts, number of new member accounts, number of canceled member accounts. This one is great, market penetration rate, revenue per member, and average member dues investment. These are all commonly asked questions but by your staff, by your board, maybe by your volunteers. These are all great points you can include in your planning, your annual planning, your program planning, your strategic planning, any kind of report that you need to share. So the other great part about these reports now is that you can actually generate a KPI going back to 2012, again, if your chamber participated. So it's really letting you generate some trends here and giving you an overview, a concise one-pager to measure your performance. So in KPIs, what you're really definitely looking for is correlation factors. Some questions to ask yourself: did you make a change last year in retention or recruitment, or do you have a new policy or a new sales script, for example? And are you now seeing increased retention or level retention? perhaps you're making a change this year and want to measure the impact next year. So this is a great opportunity to take the pulse, to actually look at the dashboard and the health of your chamber. The key is to take measurements before, during, and after changes. Sounds like school, pre-post and pre-post tests. So not only is this important for making changes, it's really good to measure the health of your organization. And I've heard from many small chamber CEOs who said they initially thought that looking at data would be challenging, especially if they saw red flags or decreased performance. But instead, many chambers who have really embraced using these KPIs and these stats have adopted a growth mindset to identify issues and trends that can help steer you back on course, and then let you have discussions and planning sessions needed with your staff and your board to make changes and set your sales running high again. So rather than putting your head in the sand, which could be easy to do, it's great to pop out, see what's happening, just get this measurement and really use it like a dashboard. So benchmarking and KPIs do help you measure progress over time, and they help you spot areas for improvements. You can use the data to help tell your chamber's story, highlight areas to justify the need for change, or measure your successes. And a couple notes before we talk with Jennifer here. I'd highly recommend viewing Kathy Height's webinar from January on benchmarking best practices. I believe that many of you did attend that webinar, and I just want to point out where you can download it. It is from the information section of the ACCE website. Click on information, and then you can go to more resources, and then click on Hero Webinars. We have all of our Hero e-tours as well as dynamic chamber benchmarking webinars from the past 2 years, all recorded here. And Kathy's was the series number 13, Benchmarking Best Practices. And so you can view that. It was about an hour, and we also have the presentation slides. So Kathy talks quite a bit about using the data to make change and to really make those measurements and to identify correlation factors and how to do that with retention. So I'd really recommend looking at that. And then also I'd recommend reviewing, if any of you attended the convention in Savannah, we had a popular session on measuring your success, and that is available on our Benchmarking Operations Chamberpedia page. And I'll send these links out to the Hometown Chambers Council email, so you have this just right at your fingertips. But we did have the Measuring Your Success panel presentation, and that you can download the slides. These are really wonderful slides. There were 4 chambers. There were a couple small chambers and mid-size, and chambers from emerging cities who gave numerous examples on different reports, whether it looked like the dashboard report, the KPIs, or the full operations report. So I'd really recommend downloading this Measuring Your Success. And in fact, the panel was organized by Jody Perry. She is CEO at the Richland Area Chamber in Ohio, and who is another small but mighty chamber. So really looking at her examples will really help us as well. So we'll include that link for you in a follow-up. And then now, again, I'd like to welcome Jennifer Chittenden, Executive Director at the Des Moines Downtown Chamber of Commerce. And Jennifer is a member, one of our new members of the HERO Task Force. And the HERO Task Force really helps us design and engineer and develop new resources, both in the HERO portal or the information section of the ACCE website, and part of what we can do to make improvements and listen to our chamber members and peers for dynamic chamber benchmarking. So I just want to thank Jennifer for her attention and her time and enthusiasm and her commitment to both ACCE and to all of you and to dynamic chamber benchmarking. So Thanks so much, Jennifer, for being here. And I'm going to pepper you with some great dynamic chamber benchmarking KPI questions. So here we go.
Thanks. I look forward
Jennifer,
to it. Yes.
Jennifer, which key indicators do you find most useful and why?
So I'm glad you asked that, Sarah. This is actually how I got introduced to the KPI report. Is I had talked with Sarah during the summer at the ACCE conference, and I was using the dashboards, the benchmarking tool originally because we were looking at some compensation survey data. And it was really tough to get what we needed with such a small sample group. Our revenues are under $200,000. And so when asked what indicators are most useful and why, the answer is simply revenues. Because when we're comparing ourselves with other chambers, it's not so much the member size that we're concerned about, it's how much are we bringing in. In addition, what is the revenue that we're getting from those members? So those are the key ones. The other factor that we have to consider, being a small chamber and all hands on deck, of course, is staffing. We're always, all of us are doing everything we can to make the organization run, and we're running lean. So again, are we keeping up with the staffing needs for where our revenue goals are going to be?
Great. Thanks, Jennifer. Yeah, that's good. So in this KPI, you're looking at total chamber staff FTEs and number of members per FTE, for example?
Not as much number of members, but the revenue per member, and yeah, revenue per FTE.
Great. Okay. Is that a question that your board is asking you as well?
They are. We're always in that question of zone of how do we compare up. Just to give you a little reference point of where the downtown chamber is located, we're in the middle of Iowa in Des Moines, and there are 23 chambers in a 50-mile radius, and we're stuck right there in the middle of all those chambers. So we have a lot of comparative data because we have some like-sized peers right here in our own neighborhood. So the question really becomes, how do we fare outside of this circle? How do we fare with our own region of Iowa, in the Midwest, and certainly in the nation? How do we make ourselves distinguished? That's a conversation we have every executive meeting and every board meeting. So having the KPI report at hand is the easy, quick answer.
That's great. That's great. Do you share a copy of this report then with each board member, either electronically or in print?
Call us old-fashioned, but we provided print usually.
I don't think that's old-fashioned. We still hear from others who definitely have print board books, so that's good. I'm sure others on the call could speak to that as well. So key indicators you mentioned are revenue and then the staffing issues. What about retention figures? What are you most interested in as executive director, and then what is your board most interested in as far as these retention numbers?
Well, certainly revenue retention is a key indicator that's really important to us, but actually I like this question because what we can do is use some of these retention pieces as points of pride in our board meeting. When we look at our report, we start to see that our retention of first-year members is high, that overall our retention is on par or above some of the levels of our peers. So actually we've been using a lot of retention figures to build up the pride within our board to add to our strategic plan, to accelerate initiatives, or just to inspire them and give them a pat on the back for the work they're doing.
That's great. That's great. So motivation factor and also strategic planning. I've also heard from a number of chambers who have looked at their data and said, okay, we're below the 50th percentile, maybe we're in the 25th or perhaps even lower. So what can we do to start, improving our retention? Maybe it's dues or member dollar retention or accounts or first-year retention. So many chambers, identify that and say, okay, well, we need a plan. We need a retention plan. Maybe that means bringing in an engagement, a person, staffer to help us do more engagement. Or like in your case, Jennifer, I know that you have a really robust volunteer group, and I'd imagine you could use your volunteers as ambassadors. And I know many on the call here too have strong ambassador groups. So would you potentially share this information and use that as a spark for your volunteers to help bring in new members or retain members.
Absolutely, and that kind of leads into another point that I wanted to bring out is having this information in hand. Again, it ties into our strategic plan and our planning overall. And I mentioned that at our recent board meeting. We've had just a lot of growth in recent months. We added a staff person in the fall. She happens to be a fantastic recruiter. She stimulated a lot of volunteers to do the same. So the question at our board meeting became, okay, so we're above par on the additions of new members, but what are we doing for serving our current members, and also how do we manage that growth long term? How are we planning ahead for that? So this gives us some insight into if we're going to move from a 275 member organization to say a 350 member organization by the end of the year, have we budgeted enough? Do we have enough staff on hand? This is such a great guideline for those discussions.
I love that you just pointed that out too, because as a small chamber, small but mighty, you're doing so much, and like all chambers, there comes a point where you have to evaluate programs and really look at, if we're growing in this area, do we need to make adjustments to other previous older programs? Do we keep program areas and offerings to our members? And maybe that includes, different dues models, and maybe you're looking at tiered dues, for example, or hybrid models, and ways to really work with and customize your membership offerings to members. And so that may, again, impact as you change membership models, may definitely impact your retention as well as, first-year retention as well as retention of dollars versus accounts. And many chambers, it takes both. You have to look at both to see, again, the health of your membership. And if you're able to retain members based on your offerings and maybe, your due schedule, what you're providing for members, your dollars are perhaps increasing while your membership accounts could potentially be decreasing. Is that something that you've talked about, Jennifer, that increase, decrease maybe in accounts versus dues and dollars?
Right, so the value of the members is starting to go up, but that also affects what services are we offering, what are the expectations of our current members with regards to the chamber and what we can provide. So, and that's where we are now as an organization, is really evaluating our packages. Do we have the right dues rates? Do we have the right investment packages? What are we doing to promote the members and currently serving those and maintaining these retention numbers?
Excellent. Okay. What other elements of this KPI report card help you measure the health of your chamber? And have you used it to monitor ebbs and flows?
So I'm actually going to go back again. This is so key in strategic planning. It really is, because you can use it in the way of, who do I want to become? I'm not there now, but I know I'm heading that direction. What is it going to take to look like that? So just doing some wishful planning and maybe even going back to the original benchmarking data and exploring some different numbers in there as well. I'm not sure if that answered your question, actually, or if I got on into a tangent.
Yeah.
But we used it quite a bit in our strategic planning, but now we're starting to be able to take that. We have committee chairs are on our board of directors as well. So that starts to trickle down to the volunteers and giving them a little more purpose behind what they're doing. So using the membership committee, for example, why do we want to add another 75 members in the next year? And if they can understand the purpose behind that, or why are they putting together a new member welcome bags, this can be supportive of those efforts.
Excellent. I love that you're talking about that too, because that's right in line with Kathy Height, what she was talking about at the January benchmarking best practices, is being intentional and purposeful in measuring these changes that you're making and looking at the impacts, and using the data to make decisions and then weighing it out over time, which is exactly what you're describing. So having this data really does help you see, in a year can seem long, but it can go so quick. And having a gauge to help measure, your changes can really then help you put things in place more permanently, or again, measure that success, measure those success factors. So we did mention...
chime in on that too.
Yeah, go ahead.
Again, it's coming up with more of a purpose. So it's not just a dashboard of numbers, but it's the purpose behind those numbers and explaining the why. It goes back into your chamber services, into the events that you're offering. Your attendees will elevate an event if they understand what the event is for. And so this has that same effect. Your participation by your volunteers is going to elevate if they understand what you're trying to accomplish and what does that mean. If you're bringing in additional revenue, what's going to happen with that down the road for them. So as long as you just kind of need to build that understanding of what is it that you're developing, what does that look like, and how are they going to benefit. So this is just the starting place.
Excellent. And so you're basically telling a story. You're using this data to tell a story to all of your constituents. How do you communicate that with your volunteers? Is it a written piece, a monthly meeting? How do you share this?
Well, who doesn't like to be a little bit of exceptional? So what we like to do for our meetings, particularly our committee meetings, is just extract a few pieces where we do really well and share that with them and give them, again, those points of pride. Where do we as a chamber stand out? Thank you for your efforts as a volunteer for being a part of that. Because of you, here's our membership numbers this year. Here's what we're going to look like next year.
Excellent. So you're definitely using this, again, purposefully for setting goals, not only with your staff and your board, but definitely your volunteers, and reaching out and doing that really important ambassador level work.
Correct.
Excellent. And then as a small but mighty chamber, how do you find the time to do all this work? Either, to participate, starting with participating, and then more importantly, using this data in the ways that you've described, communicating and, points of pride and sharing with your constituents where you're at. How do you find the time to do all that?
Oh, time is always the number one question. I think all of us are looking at our watches. And it's so important. You just have to schedule it. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is to put it on your calendar and to set aside the time. It seems like an overwhelming project at first to get your data entered, but it really isn't. Grab a cup of coffee, maybe 2 cups, sit down and just hammer it out. And the better prepared you can be for that scheduled session, the more you're going to enjoy it. If you have your books right there, if you have a calculator handy, you have all your reports and membership data, it becomes a really fun exploratory session for you to enter that. And then I think the other part of it is, after you do it, it's very fulfilling to have the information in there, to have that sense of completion, but then to start to use the tool to pull and to see those things that you're doing. And I think we're all always going to be a little bit surprised as to where we fare. Maybe we're a little lower in some spots, but there's certainly going to be those places where we had no idea we were doing that well. And so you just have to schedule it. And I recommend, if you haven't entered your data before, put aside 2-3 hours at most. You should be able to conquer most of it if you have your materials. Otherwise, just schedule a couple chunks. But once you enter it once, the copy over tool makes it so simple. I think the last time I entered data was maybe a 30-minute session.
Oh, I'm so glad you just said that, because so a couple of things. We just had a question here from Noelle, who's wondering about the fiscal year 2016 data entry. And so we're actually in a fairly big push right now for fiscal year 2016 survey participation. And what Jennifer just said is super helpful. So if your chamber has participated in the fiscal year 2015 surveys, and you can double check that by going to the home page, and then again there's 3 sections. Section 1, Chamber Profile, that's the required section. There's a progress report at the bottom, and you can see exactly where you're at. If you're at 50% or more, you can then download the reports. Now, fiscal year 2016 reports we're still in the critical mass participation phase right now, and we have been doing that from February 1 to March 1st. And so we're hoping to have as many chambers as possible participate in the surveys right now, and then very much hoping to be able to unlock or turn on the reports for fiscal year 2016 by March. So if you can participate by March 1st, that would be most ideal. What we do at ACCE is produce a couple of reports. We have a static report that we share. This is all part of our information section. We have a general membership statistics report as well as the annual operations report. Those are basically static publications that we've produced for years, every year. And so we, in the spring, in March, we look through the data of the survey participants and then generate these static reports. But the beauty of dynamic chamber benchmarking is that you can participate anytime. Again, we're in the big push now and appreciate as much participation through March 1st and beyond as possible. But your participation will help us generate these reports that we do annually. And then in dynamic chamber benchmarking, you can use the system to generate reports, these customized reports, just like we were just looking at here with Jennifer, and in the this is a demonstration report card that shows any report from dynamic chamber benchmarking is customized to show your chamber and your percentile compared to the 25th, 50th, and 75th. So that's the beauty of participating in dynamic chamber benchmarking is, like Jennifer said, it gives you these tools that you have that you can work with very easily. So once you initially get your first year of data in, maybe it's 2014, maybe it's 2015. So for example, if you have 2015 in there, for each data entry screen page, there's this copy prior year data tool that Jennifer just mentioned. You just click this on each data entry page, and it will take 2015 over into 2016. You do have to be on 2016 here to make that work. So you'd have to make sure you're on 2016, copy prior year data. It will take 2015 answers, copy them into the 2016 field. Then you have the opportunity to edit. You can edit anytime and then save your answers on each data entry page. So exactly to Jennifer's point is it may take a good hour, maybe 1 to 3 hours to get that first set of answers in there. And if you participated in fiscal year 2015, then go ahead and use that copy prior year data, super quick and easy tool. And if you didn't participate yet, I'd still recommend starting with fiscal year 2015. And the benefit of that is you can download the 2015 reports instantly. Again, so once you participate in 2015, you can download those reports for that year, and then use that copy prior year data tool. Makes it so easy. You can do that for every section, including the salary survey section. And I just want to make a quick note about salary survey section. We've been spending most of our time on the operations survey and the KPI report that you can download here. But in the salary survey section, reports and charts, you can also use the same peer cluster filter for hometown chamber council or the same revenue filter. And we have a similar KPI for the CEO compensation overview. This is a really quick and easy one-page report for CEO data, and then there are other reports for the additional positions. So I wanted to point that out. Additionally, we didn't talk about this yet, is a new, in addition to the KPI report, there is a new trends report, and that's available in both the chamber operations section and the salary survey. So when you see this trend report, what it's doing is looking, it's a PowerPoint slide deck you can download, and it's looking at your chamber and how it compares over the last 4 years. So it's going to look at 2012 through, well, 2015 right now if you're on that fiscal year. And then as soon as the 2016 reports are unlocked upon critical mass, these charts will include fiscal year 2012 through 2016. So the operations trend report can be used kind of like the KPI or dashboard indicator. And these are primarily on membership stats, but chamber members per chamber FTE trends. And again, it's going to show your chamber in the graphical format in blue compared to the 25th, 50th, and 75th percentiles. So just a quick mention about that really helps you gauge, again, your chamber's performance. You can use all of these measurements, these slides, the KPI report, any way that you customize, any way that you see fit. And again, you can insert your own slides in here, your own data. Even if you had other data points that you're looking at, you can add additional rows into that KPI report card. So a lot of flexibility here to work with. So I want to definitely thank Jennifer. Jennifer, do you have any other points? I think that was our major questions we were wanting to review. Do you have any other points about the KPI or the trend reports or dynamic chamber benchmarking in general that you'd like to make?
Thank you for asking, and I know we touched on this a few times, but the KPI is really helpful in terms of transparency, which is important for board members, executive committee members, and even groups of volunteers. It's a safe way for you to communicate what's going on with the chamber and the status of it. But I mention that specifically because when you do start to use it at the board and volunteer level, when they start to see areas where you're maybe not meeting a 50th percentile, it's a great motivator to get them rounded up and putting efforts behind some of those numbers and working alongside you, which again, we're all short on time in staff, so that's always to our benefit.
Oh, that's excellent. That is, just talking with, actually lots of chambers have been asking about transparency issues and you know, how to work with your board, and this is a great point. In April, we'll be giving a webinar on dashboard reporting, and we'll have Tony Felker from the Frisco, Texas Chamber of Commerce as our guest at that. And we were just talking last week about dashboards and board transparency, and this issue, exactly to your point, Jennifer, came up. And boards, you know, the more you know, the more you can do, and the more empowered you are to make decisions. And so rather than running away from, you know, these data points, you're empowered and have this kind of this growth opportunity to really look at your success factors and set goals, and where would we be in life without setting goals. So I think it's you know, really great to see this level of transparency with chamber staff, chamber execs, and their boards. So thanks for pointing that out, Jennifer. A couple other questions might be rolling in. Let's see here. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and move into some questions and answers, and Jennifer will stay on the line because I know folks might have questions. Here's a question. As a small but mighty chamber, when you're measuring membership numbers, do you tend to focus on the number of accounts or the revenue? Your board is reviewing the dues model, and that's a key question. So that is a good question. Jennifer, or others on the call, do you have insights? If your board is looking at your dues, are you wanting to look at total membership numbers, number of accounts, or the total revenue from members?
Well, if I can contribute, this is Jennifer again. I want to put just a bit of caution behind using just your total membership accounts. Most of us probably have some trade accounts built into there, or discounted or prorated accounts. It's not, the total number is not a true representation really of your organization and its health necessarily. There can be a lot hidden within that. And I mentioned cautionary because in 2015, that's how we actually had figured our budget with regards to membership dues. We ended up being way off at the end of the year in terms of what we actually brought in terms of dues amounts. So we have since then switched over to looking pretty much purely at revenue, dues revenue, and using that as our guide.
Excellent. Okay, so you're looking at revenue, and I just popped up the Chamber Operations report, which also gives that graphical representation of member retention of accounts versus member retention of dollars. Others who, let's see, I know if you would like to speak to that, and you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you, or if you just like to respond by the chat panel and I can read your response aloud. So the question is, are you looking at more the retention of accounts or retention of dollars? So I'm watching my panel here. And I know that Kathy Height addresses that in that benchmarking best practices as well. And so others who are on the call, and if you're still participating, if you would like to speak to that, go ahead and raise your hand, and there should be an option to do that. Or you can just use the question panel and send in your answer, dues or number of accounts that you're looking at. So far, no one else has responded. And we can, I think that might be a helpful conversation point to actually include in the Hometown Chamber's email follow-up. So maybe we'll continue that question and see if others can weigh in on that factor as well. So we'll continue that conversation by email. And thanks, Jennifer, for answering that. And are there any other questions at this time before we conclude the webinar? Looks like we may not have any other questions. So we'll say going once and going twice. And then again, we'll continue the discussion by email. We'll record today's webinar. Thank you for the thank you, and we'll send out the recording for today's webinar, and I'll also have a handy tip guide for you and a sample KPI report from 2015. And just as a reminder, the fiscal year 2016 reports will be available to participants, survey participants. We're hoping for March, definitely March. And looks like maybe one new question perhaps. If folks need to sign off, feel free to sign off. I'll stay on as long as if there are any other questions. Bradley, it looks like half of your question may have come in. If you want to retype that. And then again, we'll follow up by email. So thank you so much to everyone for participating and for attending. And let's continue this discussion by email. And thank you again, Jennifer, for your time and for sharing your expertise and your enthusiasm. And thanks to Ginny, again, earlier for introducing the webinar today. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you.